Hi everybody, it's that time for Ruminations again this week. So, this week we talked about the beginning of European rhetoric, early Christian rhetoric, and also Renaissance rhetoric. This rumination is more going to be about forming my ideas instead of going off of the ideas of my responses, because with everything that went on this week with me not feeling well in my classes, I decided to skip both of my discussion posts this week, but I was kind of bummed because I really think this era of rhetoric is really important and really interesting because this is one area that I focused on in undergrad. I have passion and interest for the Italian Renaissance and the early Christian period in England as attached to art and architecture. I studied abroad in undergrad. I took an art and architecture course that was half in London and half in Florence, Italy. So I studied art and architecture in each of those cities. So in England, it focused on all the way going back to actually the Roman time period in London, going up to the early Christian period, and then also up to the Victorian and and then back to the Tudor, and then up to the Edwardian and so on and so forth. But then in Florence, in Italy, we focused heavily on the Renaissance period and the artists of that period, the art and architecture, mostly on art history. So what I'm mostly so fascinated with is in this era, how I kind of started to talk in class is how art really started to be a commodity of rhetoric in this era. So we start to see letter writing be a form of persuasion, and it be a major form of rhetoric in these two eras. But art and architecture become really big forms of rhetoric as well. Like, art is just not being formed just for the fun of it, and neither is architecture. And big families, like the Medici family in Italy, at the time, Italy was an empire, a lot of complicated things. So that family used their wealth and the wealth that came along with their power to commission artwork and architecture to show that wealth and to show that power, but to also expand that wealth and power. So a lot of their paintings, a lot of their architecture showed their worldliness, and a lot of that showed in Italy as well. So a lot of them would take pieces of, a lot of their architectural buildings would take pieces of material, precious stones and metals from around the empire, from the Middle East, from other parts of Europe that were part of the Italian Empire at that time. So to show that they held that group of people, that they held that land. Actually, parts of France at that time, parts of southern France and Avignon were part of the Italian Empire. So one of the first Christian popes going into the Renaissance time period that was actually uh, stationed in Avignon in France, and that's one of the first palaces. So a lot of what we see as Italian Empire was not just what we see as Italy now. It, it was the Italian Empire during that time included parts of other parts of Europe and also Great Britain. So they had a lot stronger empire, and they wanted their art and architectural rhetoric to really show that. So people like the Medici family were close to people like Leonardo da Vinci and actually housed people like Michelangelo within their home to be one of their more personal artists at the time. Michelangelo was actually buried along with the Medici family in their crypt along with them. That's how much they were attached to that artist. So we see these three-dimensional forms being used as pawns in power. So rhetoric at this time is getting off the paper and onto objects and tactile like things, which I get really excited about because that starts to blend like cultural rhetoric as well. It really broadens what I'm more interested in, where we don't just see rhetorical objects as just things written on a paper, but objects that surround us in our daily lives, and how those are all pieces of rhetorical objects. How those are all rhetorical objects, not pieces. So yeah, this era really excites me. It really saddens me that I didn't do that I was too stressed out to do the responses for this week because I would have had a lot to say. There's a lot up here from my history background in undergrad. They would have really liked